Now we're back here in the Agriland stand, which is on row 10, and it's stand 223. So pop in if you want to have a go on our tractor simulators, or if you want to pick up some merchandise for the family. But here on stage again, I'm joined by Fianna Fáil MEP Billy Kelleher. Thank you very much for joining us, Billy. So first of all, I mean, I can't not start with asking, obviously, the big elephant in the room. You've just come off a presidential bid for the Fianna Fáil candidate for the presidency. You weren't successful in that. However, it did become apparent that you got a very strong endorsement nonetheless from your colleagues in Fianna Fáil.
Yes, well, I mean, it's we were only selecting one, so yes. One had to be selected.
There can only be one.
There can only be one. And yes, I got great support from my parliamentary colleagues. It was a very enjoyable campaign. It was quite intense. I suppose it was intimate as well, in the sense that it was just very internal, talking to, you know, Fianna Fáil TD senators, the broader party organisation as well. But it was very interesting just to talk about what Fianna Fáil's values are, really, was what I felt was important. And just having a contest. I think in democracy, you know, contest is healthy. Competition is good. It you know, gets people out of their comfort zone. It challenges people, challenges ideas. So from that perspective, I was quite happy that I engaged in the process. And just to say that, thank my colleagues for the support, and to wish Jim Gavin, Fianna Fáil's nominee for the presidency now, every success as well.
That's admirable of you in terms of what you said there about it's essential that there should be democracy, there should be a contest for that. But I suppose there was maybe some commentary at the time that other people, including the Taoiseach himself in Fianna Fáil, maybe would not have been as much in favour of the contest and wanted to put forward Jim Gavin as the single candidate. Did you feel that there was a little bit of an internal struggle there within the party at the time?
Well, look, internal debate rather than struggle, I would suggest. And the fact of the matter is, look, people have different views of the quality of a candidate, or what type of candidate believe would be best to present to the public in a presidential election. I've been a TD, you know, an MEP for many, many years. I felt I had a certain credentials, and you know, you put forward your views, your opinion, your ideas, and yourself as a person. And there was an adjudication last Tuesday by the Fianna Fáil Parliamentary Party, and I was just shy a number of votes. So look, I think overall, you know, the presidency itself is, I think, an important office. I think it should be reflective of the new Ireland that's out there. We have an increasing population. We have a young population. There's discussions across the island of Ireland in terms of, you know, the new constitutional arrangements that may take place over the next number of years. And I think that I could have offered something in terms of those discussions. And here today, for example, in Screggan in Offaly, I also think the President could very much advocate for rural Ireland. Sometimes rural Ireland can be left behind in the debates. And I think a President has a duty to advocate for communities. And that would mean also rural communities, urban communities, but also sectors like agriculture, promoting the positive aspects of our indigenous sector, our exports, and just making sure there's a voice, that soft voice for family farms and just for what we do in rural Ireland on a daily basis.
Well, speaking of family farms there, let's talk about farming now. Generational renewal is a challenge, certainly for the farming community in this country. And in the past hour, the Minister for Agriculture has announced recommendations as part of a sort of a generational renewal plan. But we're not unique in Ireland in having that succession generational renewal challenge. It seems to be in farming across Europe as well, and something that really needs to be, I suppose, addressed. But in terms of the other countries across Europe and what the EU can do then, you know, to ensure that there is a sustainable, be it economic, you know, financial future for farming families, how serious is it that we address this?
Well, it's urgent, actually. It's a crisis proportions in some countries, and if we don't address it here soon, we'll be in that space as well. If you look at the demographics of farmers, the average age across Europe is well into the middle 60s now. In Ireland, we're at, I think, about the age of 60 is about the average age of a farmer. And very quickly, if we don't address a number of fundamental issues, first and foremost, there has to be a future in farming for the younger generation to see it as a you know, an area of interest that they would go towards. So there has to be certainty around future. And that means there has to be viability. we can't expect people to go into an industry where there just isn't opportunity and viability. So we have to ensure that there's viability. The other area I think that's causing huge difficulties is regulatory fatigue, where we consistently are changing regulations. There's uncertainty around what type of regulation will be next week, next month, next year. So we have to bring regulatory certainty to the broader agricultural sector as well. And then I think from an Irish perspective as well, there has to be greater facilitation, maybe through taxation changes, to support transitional arrangements, whereby what I'm saying is if you have a family farm where you have two families living off it, the family that's going into retirement and then the younger generation coming in taking over, that puts huge financial pressure on farming and income. And I just think there has to be some recognition of that need to have a more seamless transition that's incentivized and encouraged. And so I think there's a bit of work to be done there as well. But from a European perspective, if we want to have, food security, food supply of high quality, well, if we don't have another generation of farmers looking at farming as a career path, because it's fine to say it's a way of life, but a way of life that doesn't support financially just simply will not sustain itself.
Yeah, no, it's true. You mentioned there about the taxation, and I know there's elements of that in the generational plan that the minister has brought out today. But even pensions, pensions are a problem. Even accessing the state pension, if you have a farm, then the farmers want to hold on to their farm longer because they're not going to get the state pension, which delays the next generation coming up. There's a lot of a quagmire there for them at that end of the spectrum.
There is, yes. And as I said, when you have two incomes, coming from the same farm, there's a period of time where it puts huge pressure on that system to support two families. And I think that anything that's created and imaginative around the area of pensions, taxation, inheritance, various reliefs that may be put over a longer period of time, that they would assist. But like a simple example of where we go to regulatory fatigue, like we're now discussing the nitrates derogation, for example. And the nitrates derogation is crucial, not just to dairy farming, but to Irish agriculture, that we maintain it and that there's certainty around it into the future. Otherwise, we'll have farmers will be unwilling to invest. They won't be able to get loans from banks based on the fact that there will be uncertainty around how many cows you can maintain on a farm if the derogation was withdrawn or reduced. So these are having real life impacts. And land displacement is a very significant challenge in Ireland. What we don't want is a situation where land becomes, to the highest bidder full stop. In other words, we could end up the dairy farmer displacing the beef farmer displacing the tillage farmer, and the tillage farmer displacing the sheep farmer. We need to have a broad-based agricultural industry, and retention of derogation is important from that point of view.
I mean, in Ireland, I think we particularly know the impact of losing a nitrates derogation could have on our farming sector. But from an EU perspective, Billy, and you have lots of peers, colleagues and contacts in the EU, is there a sense among your contacts out in the EU that they understand that? Because what we've been getting is the sense that the EU really just wants to care about the water quality and what the EPA results are. And while we in Ireland know what the impact is on family farms, is that really going to be a factor? And would you be optimistic that we will get a positive decision on the nitrates derogation in terms of farming?
Well, look, from my perspective, you have to be optimistic. You have to hope that the argument you put forward will be listened to and will be acted upon. I mean, if you don't have that degree of hope, well, then certainly you may not enter into the discussions in the first place. There's a number of things I'll say about the derogation. Firstly, there's only a number of countries that have any knowledge of a derogation. That would be Denmark, the Netherlands, and Belgium. The vast majority of the countries have never had a derogation and never sought a derogation. So there's only about 4 countries that understand what it is about. The Danes dropped their request for derogation. The Dutch initially did. They may be back in again. And half of the Belgian, Wallonia, were also looking at this as well. So we have a very limited understanding across Europe of what a derogation is, simply because they've never availed of it. So from an Irish perspective, we do have to explain. And of course, there is the challenge that if you are asking other countries to support your efforts to retain a derogation, they are saying, well, maybe we're also conferring financial advantage on Ireland over a Danish farmer or a Dutch farmer or a German farmer. So you have that issue as well that you have to try and address. But we also have to explain that we have a different type of farming. We're pasture based. Our animals are out on grass for, in some parts of the country, 10 months a year. That's very unusual in Nordic countries and Germany and elsewhere as well, where they're, maybe housed for 6-7 months of the year, and less pasture based. So we have a lot of explaining to do, but I think the government is unified and committed on this occasion to try and ensure that, number one, we act on the science. The science and the water quality is showing there is improvement. We want to convince the Commission that we need additional time, and not just time on an incremental basis like 1 year after 1 year, that we have time for a long period of time to give certainty to farmers that if they invest, the derogation will be there for a period of time ahead, and that we don't have this stop-start and this anxiousness around will we retain it in 2026, 2027, 2028. So we're putting on it. We actually had a meeting with Ursula von der Leyen, the four Fianna Fáil MEPs, just before the summer recess. We met her for an hour, and we had 3 items on the agenda. Gaza was one of them, and Palestine and the war there, and the tragedies unfolding before us. But also we spoke about the derogation for 20 minutes. She was very well briefed on us, being truthful. She knew intimately about it, and the importance of it we relayed to her about us retaining it into the future.
Finally, just briefly, I might touch on Mercosur as well before we let you go. Billy, obviously the impact it has on Irish farmers is well known, and what Irish farm leaders have argued will be the impact of letting in 99,000 tonnes of Brazilian or other Mercosur country beef. But when it comes to, and you have said we should form alliances with other countries in Europe, but when it comes to what we call the bigger players in Europe, I don't think they're too fussed really about the impact it'll have on Irish farmers, because they perhaps have bigger weight in the game.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is a significant issue because, I mean, the Mercosur agreement has been split into a trade component and then a political and cooperative component. And the trade component only requires qualified majority. So that means, you could be outvoted. So we're trying to make sure that countries that have concerns about Mercosur will stay aligned to the Irish position. That's very difficult. Bear in mind, Mercosur is more than just about beef. It is also about, trade in general. And some countries like Germany and the Nordic countries, Italy, for example, which would have had concerns initially, they have sort of withdrawn their concerns about Mercosur. So it is a significant challenge. There's a number of factors in Mercosur that are critically important. I mean, we need to insist on mirror imaging regulation. We can't have a situation where farmers in Mercosur countries can produce product to different standards than we obligate Irish farmers or European farmers to produce. And if there's any distortion in trade, well, there would have to be some mechanism put in place. But look, we haven't given up. We're still speaking to the French and the Poles and others to see whether or not we can build enough of alliance. But the odds are stacked. The odds are stacked because you need to build an alliance. You need to have 35% of the population and a certain number of big countries and small countries to build what's called a blocking minority. And that is going to be a significant challenge. So there's a number of things I'll say. Firstly, we have grave concerns about Mercosur, and we need to insist that whatever happens, that we put market distortion programs in place, that in the event of there being a major shock to the market, that there would be supports. And I'm really of the view that there has to be mirroring of regulations. And obviously, anything that incentivizes the destruction of the Amazonian rainforest is something that I am deeply uncomfortable about as well. So
yeah, well, of course, we do have the EUDR now, the EU deforestation regulation as well, but we can't get into it just at the moment, Billy. But thank you very much for joining us, MEP Billy Kelleher, joining us there to discuss, I suppose, farming and particularly in an EU context.